I thought I was married to the perfect woman. We built a life together, dreamed of children, but it turned out she was playing her own secret game. She decided to leave me with nothing, confident I had no idea. What she didn't know was that I had already played my hand. I met Lauren at a charity gala in Boston 8 years ago. She stood out immediately, not just because of her striking looks, but because of how she commanded attention without seeming to try. While other guests networked aggressively, Lauren moved through the crowd with an easy grace, leaving people smiling in her wake. When our eyes met across the room, I felt something shift inside me. I didn't know then that this moment would lead to both the happiest and darkest chapters of my life. Our courtship was a whirlwind. Lauren worked in marketing for a major tech company, while I managed portfolios at a boutique investment firm. We were both ambitious, but we shared the same dreams of building something meaningful together. Our first date turned into a 3-hour conversation about everything from childhood memories to our hopes for the future. By the end of that night, I knew she was special. 4 years of dating flew by, and marriage felt like the natural next step. The wedding was perfect, intimate but elegant, just like Lauren herself. We bought a beautiful colonial house in the suburbs, complete with the white picket fence she'd always wanted. My career was taking off, and Lauren had just landed a major promotion. We talked about starting a family soon. Everything seemed to be falling perfectly into place. Looking back, I should have noticed the small changes sooner. They were subtle at first, so subtle that I convinced myself I was imagining things. Lauren started working later, which wasn't unusual given her new position. But then she began turning off her phone during these late nights, something she'd never done before. Our shared moments became shorter, our conversations more surface level. When I tried to dig deeper, she'd deflect with a well-practiced smile and change the subject. The Lauren I knew had always been an open book with me. We shared everything, our fears, our dreams, even the smallest details of our days. But now there were gaps in her stories, little inconsistencies that nagged at me. She'd mention a work dinner that wasn't on her calendar, or reference a meeting that her assistant knew nothing about when I happened to call the office. I'm not the jealous type. I've never believed in snooping through phones or checking up on partners. Trust was always the foundation of our relationship. But when I noticed her getting notifications from a hidden chat app one morning, something inside me broke. The woman I loved, the person I trusted most in the world, was keeping secrets. Still, I waited. I watched. I noticed how she'd angle her phone away from me when typing, how she'd step outside to take certain calls. One day, she forgot her phone at home while rushing to a client meeting. That was when I made my move. I had already purchased a backup device with monitoring software for public Wi-Fi networks. It wasn't about invading her privacy, it was about protecting myself from whatever storm was brewing. What I discovered felt like a punch to the gut. Lauren wasn't having an affair, as I'd initially feared. No, this was much worse. She was methodically planning to destroy me. The conversations with her divorce attorney painted a clear picture. They had been strategizing for weeks, maybe months. Lauren had documented every minor disagreement, every moment of frustration, twisting them into a narrative of emotional abuse. She described me as unstable, controlling, manipulative, everything I wasn't. The irony would have been laughable if it hadn't been so devastating. Judges always favor the wife, she wrote in one message. Especially when there's a history of emotional instability. We just need to build the right narrative. The right narrative. As if our 8 years together were just a story she could rewrite to suit her needs. She had plans for everything, our house, our joint accounts, even my personal investments. She'd been quietly documenting all our assets, preparing to claim she'd contributed more than her share. Her attorney was coaching her on how to maximize her claims, suggesting she start keeping a diary of my concerning behavior. I read through their exchanges with a growing sense of numbness. This was the woman who had nursed me through pneumonia last winter, never leaving my side. The same person who had surprised me with a weekend trip to Maine for my birthday, planning every detail because she knew how much I loved the coast. How long had she been playing this role? Had any of it been real? But as the shock wore off, something else took its place. A cold, calculating clarity. Lauren thought she had the upper hand because she was moving in secret. She didn't realize that knowledge is the ultimate advantage. And now, I knew everything. I started my counteroffensive carefully. The first step was protecting my assets without raising suspicion. I had cultivated strong relationships in the financial sector over the years, and now those connections proved invaluable. Through a series of perfectly legal but complex transactions, I began moving our more liquid assets into protected positions. My brother Mark had always been my closest confidant. When I explained the situation, he didn't hesitate to help. We set up a series of holding companies, with him as the primary stakeholder. On paper, everything looked routine, just standard portfolio diversification. Lauren's careful documentation of our assets was already outdated, and she had no idea. The house was trickier. Lauren had fallen in love with it at first sight, and I knew it was central to her plans. She'd mentioned several times how much the property value had increased since we bought it. But I had friends in real estate assessment, and timing was on my side. The market was showing signs of cooling, and it didn't take much to get a conservative revaluation. The new assessment came in significantly lower than Lauren's estimates. Through it all, I maintained a perfect facade of normalcy. I came home at the same time, kissed her cheek, asked about her day. I listened to her talk about future plans with a special kind of fascination now, knowing each word was part of her performance. She was good, I had to give her that. If I hadn't seen the evidence myself, I might never have noticed how carefully she was setting her stage. I even started confiding in a close friend about some manufactured work stress, making sure word would get back to Lauren. She took the bait perfectly, documenting my increasing instability in her diary. Every move she made to strengthen her case actually played right into my hands. The most surreal part was watching her maintain her loving wife routine. She'd cook my favorite meals, ask about my day, curl up next to me on the couch during movie nights. One evening, she even organized a surprise dinner with my parents, playing the perfect daughter-in-law. I watched her charm them as she always had, knowing that in a few hours she'd be emailing her lawyer about how to claim part of my inheritance. "Your mom showed me those old photos of the lake house again," she said that night, her head on my shoulder. "We should plan a trip there this summer." She was already planning to demand a share of my family's vacation property in the divorce. The audacity was almost admirable. But Lauren's performance wasn't quite perfect. Now that I knew what to look for, I caught the micro-expressions that betrayed her true feelings, the slight tension in her smile when I mentioned our future, the momentary hesitation before each display of affection. She was good, but not good enough. I gathered evidence methodically. Every email, every message, every manipulated narrative she created, I documented it all. But more importantly, I started laying traps. I mentioned certain assets in passing, letting her think she had discovered something I was trying to hide. In reality, these were carefully constructed decoys, designed to make her overplay her hand. The psychological toll of maintaining this charade was significant. There were nights I'd lie awake, Lauren breathing softly beside me, and wonder how we'd gotten here. I thought about the day I proposed, how genuine her tears of joy had seemed. Had she been calculating even then, or had something changed along the way? The questions haunted me, but I couldn't afford to let them distract me. As weeks passed, Lauren grew bolder. She started forgetting to pay her share of the household expenses, building a paper trail to support her claim that she had been financially supporting me. She began casually mentioning friends who were going through divorces, watching my reactions carefully. "Poor Sarah," she'd say, "her ex tried to hide assets, but her lawyer caught him. He lost everything." The irony of her warnings would have been comical if it weren't so twisted. I kept my own counsel, sharing the full scope of my plans only with Mark. Even my lawyer only knew pieces of the strategy. I'd learned from Lauren's example how quickly information could spread. Every week, I'd meet Mark for what appeared to be routine business lunches, slowly putting each piece of my counter-strategy into place. The final phase of my preparation involved a series of careful financial moves. I knew Lauren was monitoring our main accounts, so I made sure she saw exactly what she expected, a man trying desperately to maintain control of his assets, making amateur mistakes that would later serve as evidence of financial manipulation. Each apparent blunder was actually a carefully placed breadcrumb, leading to exactly the wrong conclusions. In the meantime, the real transactions were happening through a complex web of legitimate business investments, each one further securing my position while appearing completely routine to any outside observer. My years in finance had taught me that the best moves are the ones that look boring on paper. Lauren's big move came on a quiet Tuesday evening. I had known it was coming. Her recent activities had shown a clear pattern of preparation. She had been steadily moving her personal items out of the house, a few pieces at a time, so gradually that it would have been imperceptible if I hadn't been watching for it. She had scheduled meetings with her lawyer twice that week, and I had noticed her examining our prenuptial agreement the night before. She came home later than usual, her designer heels clicking purposefully across our hardwood floors. I was in my home office, pretending to work while actually watching her approach through the security camera feed I'd installed months ago. She had changed clothes since leaving the office, a power move I recognized from her important client meetings. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was about to become her most important negotiation yet. "We need to talk," she said from the doorway, her voice steady but with an undertone of rehearsed emotion. I turned to face her, keeping my expression neutral. She had positioned herself perfectly in the doorframe, body language open but assertive. Always the marketing professional, even now. "Of course," I replied, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. She shook her head slightly, another power move, making me come to her space instead. I complied, following her to our living room, where divorce papers were already laid out on the coffee table. She must have placed them there before announcing her presence. The staging was impeccable. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began, perching on the edge of our $1,000 couch, the one she had insisted we needed for entertaining clients. "I'm not happy, James. We've grown apart, and I think we both know this isn't working anymore." I watched her face as she delivered her practiced speech. The slight tremor in her voice, the way she blinked back tears, she had rehearsed this, probably for weeks. Under different circumstances, I might have appreciated the performance. "This is unexpected," I managed, playing my part. My apparent shock seemed to give her confidence. She leaned forward slightly, her expression softening into practiced concern. "I know this is a shock, but I think part of you must have felt it too. We've been living separate lives for months now." The irony of her words almost made me laugh. She had no idea how separate those lives had truly been. She slid the papers toward me, her French manicured nails catching the light. "I've taken the liberty of having my lawyer draw up an initial agreement. I think you'll find it very fair." I picked up the document, skimming through pages I had already seen weeks ago, thanks to my monitoring of her email. The demands were exactly as I had expected: astronomical spousal support, half of all assets, and sole ownership of the house. She had even included a claim on my family's vacation property, just as I had predicted. "This is quite comprehensive," I said slowly, letting a hint of anxiety creep into my voice. She responded immediately, shifting into the supportive role she had played so well for years. "I know it's a lot to take in," she soothed, reaching out to touch my hand. I forced myself not to recoil. "But I really think this is the best way forward for both of us. A clean break, fair division of assets, and we can both move on with our lives." I set the papers down carefully, taking a deep breath. This was the moment I had been preparing for, the culmination of months of careful planning. My hand shook slightly as I reached for my briefcase, not from nervousness, but from the effort of containing my anticipation. "You're right about one thing," I said quietly. "We do need a clean break." I opened my briefcase and began laying out my own set of documents. Lauren's expression flickered as she watched me place each paper carefully on the table, confusion giving way to uncertainty, then the first hints of fear. "What is this?" she asked, her voice losing its practiced smoothness. "Everything," I replied simply. "Every email between you and your lawyer. Every fabricated diary entry. Every manipulated statement. The complete record of how you plan to destroy me." The color drained from her face as she scanned the first page. I saw her hands begin to tremble as she recognized her own words staring back at her. "This is private correspondence," she whispered, but the confidence was gone from her voice. "You had no right dash. To protect myself?" I interrupted softly. "The same way you had no right to build a false narrative about emotional abuse. To plan to take everything I've worked for." She stood abruptly, her professional demeanor cracking. "You don't understand. I just needed dash. Security. I finished for her. Insurance. The upper hand. I laid out more documents. Like the security of our joint accounts. The ones you've been systematically documenting." I pushed forward a bank statement. "They're empty now. All legally transferred, of course, with a complete paper trail showing your attempted financial manipulation." Lauren sank back onto the couch, her legs seemingly unable to hold her. "That's not possible. I monitored everything." "You monitored what I wanted you to see," I corrected her. "Every mistake I made, every secret account you discovered, they were all part of the trail I created for you. While you were building your case, I was building mine." I showed her the property assessment next. "The house you were so eager to claim. It's worth less than half what you estimated in your filing. The market downturn hit this area particularly hard. I didn't mention my connections in the assessment office. And those investment accounts you documented so carefully. They don't exist anymore, at least not in any form your lawyer can trace." Her breathing had become shallow, her eyes darting between the papers and my face. The poised, confident woman who had walked in minutes ago was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. "James," she tried, her voice breaking. "We can talk about this. We can figure something out dash. The way you figured out how to paint me as emotionally unstable." I pushed forward printed copies of her messages. "The way you planned to use my family's trust against me. The way you coached witnesses to support your story." Tears began rolling down her cheeks, smearing her perfect makeup. "I never meant dash. To get caught," I finished. "That's the only thing you didn't mean to do." I stood up, gathering my documents. "My lawyer will be contacting yours in the morning. I'm filing a countersuit for attempted fraud and defamation. The evidence is quite compelling." "You'll destroy me," she whispered. "No, Lauren. You did that yourself. I'm just making sure I don't go down with you." The following weeks passed in a blur of legal proceedings. Lauren's carefully constructed case crumbled in the face of my evidence. Her lawyer, seeing the writing on the wall, advised her to settle. In the end, she walked away with nothing but her personal belongings and the weight of her own choices. I sold the house, for more than the assessment value, naturally, and moved to a different state. Mark helped me restructure my investments, this time without the need for secrecy. I heard through mutual friends that Lauren had moved back to her hometown, taking a lower-level position at a small marketing firm. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about those 8 years we shared. I wonder if any of it was real, if the woman I loved ever truly existed. The photos from our wedding still sit in a box somewhere, showing two people who looked so happy, so certain of their future together. Now they feel like artifacts from someone else's life. The betrayal changed me, there's no denying that. I'm more cautious now, more guarded with my trust. But I also learned something valuable about myself: when pushed to the wall, I don't break. I plan. I adapt. I survive. Lauren taught me that love can be faked, but she also taught me that justice doesn't always wear the face we expect. Sometimes it looks like a careful paper trail, a series of strategic moves, and the quiet satisfaction of watching a carefully laid trap spring shut. I still believe in love, surprisingly enough. But now I believe in protecting myself just a little bit more.